Oh, good morning. Welcome in. What a AFC and NFC championship game last weekend. That's why we love the sport. And it just does not get any better than the NFL. And it gave us everything we wanted last Sunday. Sipping on a couple of beers. We made some nachos. And just the momentum swings throughout the afternoon and evening from the AFC and NFC championship games. Now we got the Super Bowl with my Bengals and my Rams. Excited about that. We are the Out of Bounds Show, driven by the pre-owned and new SUVs and trucks. Mac Hike in Flowwood, MacHikeFlowwood.com if you're in the market for a truck or SUV. You're listening to 105.9 The Zone ESPN. Our guests join us on the Bucked Up Energy Drinks guest line. And this is the Out of Bounds Show. We welcome in our friend Steve Palazzolo, senior analyst, Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. Steve, you talked about it with us for the last few years, but it was never more obvious or evident than watching Joe Burrow do what he did down 21-3 against the Chiefs. Just talk about the power of having a good quarterback and how that gives you a shot in this league that we love.
Yeah, I mean, first off, you can make comebacks like that maybe, I don't want to say easier than ever, but in a pass-first league, you've got the ability to do that. And I think, you saw a guy like Joe Burrow. He didn't play a perfect game, but that's what makes him special. Even in his, non-perfect game, he did, fourth quarter interception, got away with another one that could have been intercepted. The type of guy that's just going to make plays, third downs. He's going to find a way to run for a first down. Did that a couple times. Making big throws when needed, hanging in there. Didn't matter that even though the Chiefs didn't sack him, they were getting some pressure. He was still playing behind an offensive line that's a little weak on the interior from a pass protection standpoint and on the right side. So, Burrow has elevated this Bengals team. Obviously, the rest of the team deserves credit as well. But I also think in this situation, this was as much an epic collapse by the Chiefs as it was a great win by the Bengals. So certainly the Bengals got some help on the other side with the Chiefs folding, from what we saw offensively.
Hey, all right, let's hit on that. There was about a 7-game stretch where Mahomes and the Chiefs couldn't figure it out in the regular season. We were all surprised and shocked that they were playing the way they were. Then they got it, somewhat figured out, started rolling through the playoffs. How surprised were you that as good as he was in the first half, other than the last drive, that at the NFL level, that blows my mind that they didn't get any points going into halftime. But how surprised were you with the way he played in both the second half, how poorly he played in the second half and in overtime? And I know it wasn't just him, but that's how we do this thing.
No, I mean, it was him, though. I mean, I've never seen that big of a stark difference, right? I mean, my colleague, Eric Eager, who was actually at the game, he said, if you look back at the first half, the Chiefs earned every potential yard that they could earn. So their first 3 drives, they scored touchdowns, so they got every yard possible. And then the last drive, they made it to the 1, right? It's every yard possible except 1 in the first half. That's how efficient they were offensively. And obviously, looking back, that was a turning point in the game. But I don't think anybody looked at that play at the end of the half like, well, there we go. The Chiefs just lost it. Now they're going to blow the game. Like, you saw a team that wasn't being stopped. And then in the second half, they were. So I thought the Bengals made some nice adjustments. They did drop 8 rushers, dropped 8 into coverage a bunch. And that forced Mahomes to be patient, and he wasn't. He was just not he wasn't able to get through his progressions quickly enough. And then when that broke down, he was trying to do too much, holding on to it, still trying to create big plays. But it was a completely different team. I really don't think I've ever seen anything like that. And it did look like Mahomes was shook a little bit because he was holding on to the ball. Took 4 sacks in the fourth quarter alone, including the one that would have been, he had that fumble when they're trying to go for the game-winning, game-time field goal. If the Chiefs don't recover that, I mean, that's literally one of the worst plays in NFL history.
Yes.
I mean, you'd remember that forever. The fact that Mahomes held the ball for 9-10 seconds on that play and fumbled it. I mean, that's the crazy part. His average time in the pocket on his 4 sacks was about 8 seconds.
That is
that's all on him.
Insane in the NFL.
Yeah, it's crazy. So that's, again, the Bengals are doing a pretty good job mixing up their coverages and all that stuff. But Mahomes is just, there's no plan B when Tyreek and Kelsey got there. So are taken away. So maybe the second half was like a microcosm of those midseason struggles that you referenced. I think there are elements of that, but I just didn't expect it to show up like that in the second half. So my thing with the Chiefs, though, they could still be a dynasty. They could still be the team that you need to beat every single year. Even the Patriots dynasty, if you ask Patriots fans, was it all great for 20 years? No, there were ridiculous, heartbreaking losses for Patriots fans through the years. Chiefs fans are going to have to deal with that too if they still want to win a few more championships. So doesn't mean the Chiefs are done, but it was quite the collapse, I think, for them in the second half.
What do you make of, we're talking about a great coach and a great quarterback. What do you make of them not being able to adjust or not willing to adjust? I don't know what the communication was like on the sideline between Andy Reid and Mahomes, but what do you make of the fact that what you just told us, the 4 sacks, the turnovers, the 8 seconds running around and all of that, what do you make of them not being able to adjust and do something positive through that time in the second half and overtime?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's got to be the coaching, right? Because I mentioned the Bengals were dropping 8 into coverage a lot. And the thing about the Chiefs this year, when they were going through that slump, you could actually look at this team that had Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and say the strength of their team was actually the offensive line for a majority of this season, with Orlando Brown and Joe Tooney and Creed Humphrey, the rookie, like the guys that they brought in, Trey Smith in the SEC. So they can run the ball. Like, they actually run the ball really well. They run block really well. All of those offseason moves that they made to protect Patrick Mahomes actually also gave them one of the better run blocking offensive lines. That would be the other part of the second half where, based off the way the Bengals are playing it, you don't have to chuck it around. You know me, I love to throw the ball, but I love to have answers to what the defense is throwing at you. And I think the Chiefs could have run a little bit more effectively or more often in the second half. So I think that starts from the top, and it puts a little bit less pressure on Mahomes, especially when you start to see the way he's pressing. I don't know why he's pressing, up 2 scores for the majority of the second half, but he was pressing and he was off. And it's also a fine line. I mean, there was a bunch of just third down stops by the Bengals, a sack here and there, an incompletion here and there that got the Bengals off the field. So it's not like it's disastrous execution, but it's just the nature of football. And the Chiefs, they have to have more answers as far as what defenses are throwing at them. And again, I'm going to compare them to the Patriots just because it's the closest proxy to what the Chiefs are. The Patriots were able to sustain success for 20 years because they could always adjust to the league, or they could reload, or whatever it might have been. And so the Chiefs are going to be battling that if they want to stay on top.
Oh, and the history tells us they won't, right? Because it's only one team that's been able to do what the Patriots did for 20 years.
Yeah, and now you have – the Patriots had some competition, right? It was in the middle of Peyton Manning and the Colts and Roethlisberger and the Steelers. Philip Rivers was there. I mean, they had competition. But, yeah, the AFC is becoming loaded, obviously, with everybody we've talked about, Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and all of the good young quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson. They're all in the AFC. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge. But I do think the Chiefs, as long as they have Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, they'll be in the mix, and they'll be, right there in that AFC Championship game potentially. But it's a fine line between that and winning those Super Bowl titles.
Senior analyst, Pro Football Focus, Steve Palazzolo on the Out of Bounds Show and the Bucked Up Energy Drinks guest line, pff.com. So are we giving Joe Burrow enough credit? I mean, I understand all the hype leading. We've got a long time before a week from this Sunday, and it's the biggest sporting event in North America. But, I mean, you're right there, Steve. You're in Cincinnati. Y'all are all over every quarterback, every snap. I mean, could this guy be some kind of combo of Montana, Elway, and Brady? I mean, he can do it all, and I still think we sleep on his athleticism. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to start getting proper credit. I think you see the quotes that Joe Burrow has, that he exudes confidence. So there is, I hate to compare it to anybody, to certainly not to Brady, but Montana and all that stuff. But there are just elements of Burrow's game where that is the case, right? Where you just, again, even on not his best day, you just believe he's going to find a way to put his team in position to win. And whether it was at LSU, going through the college football playoff, going through the SEC, with the Bengals in these elimination games down the stretch to win the division, Burrow just continues to step up, right? I mean, he's accurate, he's mobile enough, right? He can certainly move around the pocket, but he can pick up yards with his legs again, as we saw the other day. So I think he does have all of that. So now his next step is going to be, let's avoid the negative plays, the stats that have probably been a little bit too high this year. A lot of those generally on the quarterback. Even if you're under pressure with the offensive line, the quarterback can do a better job of getting rid of the ball.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's something Burrow can get better at. But as far as throwing the ball up to 20 yards, Burrow's as good as it gets as far as timing and accuracy. Down the field, he's gotten so much better this year versus last year. Thank you, Jamar Chase. So, yeah, Burrow, I think he's in that next, echelon. I've always said, who are the next quarterbacks when the Bradys and Breezes and all those guys retire? I think Burrow, Herbert, I mean, they firmly established themselves as, that next group in that top 5, top 8, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, Burrow, he'll get plenty of credit. Off the win against the Rams.
Yeah, we're talking Joe Burrow with Steve Palazzolo. Should we rethink what we thought of him? And here's, all right, I mean, Andrew Luck, greatest thing ever as a prospect. I mean, at the end of the day, should we step back and rethink and say, okay, not only was Burrow a better prospect and we missed a little bit, but he's a better player, or he is starting to play his way into being a better player than Andrew Luck. Are you hell no with that? Where are you with that? Me throwing that out there.
Luck had elements of his game early on where it was like, okay, there's something special about him. He can elevate his teammates, but he wasn't playing. Luck never played at the level that maybe he was hyped up to play at until maybe year 5 or 6 of his career, which was, right before he retired. So I thought by the time Andrew Luck left, the stats may not have shown it, but he was starting to play at that extremely high level. Burrow's getting there much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what this does, looking back as far as prospect status, but I will say it is interesting when you look at the best quarterbacks of all time, and there's so few of them who were like the anointed one from start to finish, right? That John Elway was kind of that player. Peyton was kind of that player. Luck was that player. But the real best of all time quarterbacks, whether it's a Brady, a Rodgers, a Breeze, Montana, Marino, like all of those guys dealt with something. Either they were later round picks or Marino had a bad final year or whatever it was. I mean, Burrow didn't win the job at Ohio State. I really think there's something to these guys that battle adversity and then come out of it. And I don't know how you predict that. I mean, even Mahomes, it wasn't like Mahomes was the slam dunk prospect coming out of Texas Tech. He had all the highlight reel stuff, but it's like, man, you can't even play from the pocket. You hate playing from the pocket. Well, Mahomes started to do that better overall until Sunday. So it is interesting to me in quarterback analysis that the human element of overcoming something, which maybe a Trevor Lawrence hasn't had to do as much of, or an Andrew Luck didn't have to do as much of. They were like the wire-to-wire number 1 picks. But Burrow wasn't that guy. He emerged at LSU and just took this massive step forward. And maybe, I think looking back, you say, okay, give me the guy that's had to fight through something.
Yes.
Because that's going to help him more in the long run.
Okay, would you take this is easy. I mean, it's not easy. But now that we can kind of look back and we see what Burrow did this year, who would you take, Burrow or Andrew Luck?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to completely overrate or underrate Andrew Luck. I'd probably take Burrow at this point because he's achieved it in year two. But I'll say this too: we've seen a lot of quarterbacks peak in year two, not peak, but have incredible year twos,
like Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz, right? Carson Wentz, Lamar Jackson, Mahomes. Still, his best season was year two. Not that he's massively regressed, but this year he did take a step back. So it doesn't mean that it's always going to be this like upward trend all the time. I always joke,
Right.
It's not Madden where you just get a couple points of grade, overall grade every year, and you get better and better and better and better. It's just not the reality. So you always have to be careful with that. Wentz was declared as the next great one, and so was Lamar, all that stuff. So you just have to be careful with that stuff. But yeah, I love what Burrow brings to the table. Have a lot of faith in him, and I'm excited to see what he can do too once the Bengals get a little bit better up front as well.
Okay. I still think we're sleeping on his athleticism, but all right. Steve Palazzolo, PFF.
No, it's a good part of his game. You saw that at LSU too. He faced a lot of pressure at LSU.
He did.
He's thrown to those great receivers. He picked up yards on the ground when needed and had good pocket presence. So it's a huge part of Burrow's game.
Look, I was at the national championship game. I mean, it wasn't going their way early. He brought the ball down once and just, split the difference on Clemson and their defense. And I was like, whoa. It's just deceiving for whatever reason.
Fast. I remember thinking that game was just so fast, like NFL speed. And then eventually it slowed down for Burrow, and he was great.
That's right. That's exactly right. The first quarter and a half was a struggle for LSU. Steve Palazzolo on the Bucked Up Energy Drinks guest line. Blake?
Yeah, Steve. So you kind of mentioned this, and we've hit around this on the show, but not done a deep dive. So Brady retiring is kind of the last of what was an era, a generation, a window, so to speak. And for people my age, like 30 to 35-ish, that, we pretty much don't know anything other than Brady and then like the Manning, Breeze, Rivers, Roethlisberger era, that kind of group, right? So those are all gone.
Yep.
They're all gone, okay? And we kind of had a lull where we didn't bring quite as many in to be like, there's only like an Aaron Rodgers, a Russell Wilson at that age. So this next core group, so like the Dak Prescotts and backwards in terms of age, can you give me like who you think we'll be looking at in 10 years or 15 years going, oh, this is the Brady, Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning era. Now it's the XYZ names era. Who are those names for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I didn't know, we didn't know who those guys were going to be. Like even 2 years ago, you didn't know if a Josh Allen or a Joe Burrow would really be a part of that. But I still think Mahomes is the pinnacle of those guys that we've seen of this next generation. If Deshaun Watson ever comes back, probably his name's in that conversation. Dak is in the conversation. As far as I always use that top 8 quarterback cutoff. I think Dak's in that mix. Burrow, Herbert, and Josh Allen will all be there. Kyler Murray, I think, will be in there. Well, honestly, Stafford's at the tail end of his career, presumably, but he's still 33 or whatever he is. I mean, he's not that old, so he could be in that mix now. I don't think Stafford was a top 10 quarterback for his last generation, but he might be for this one. Russ too, as they're a little bit older. But I think Mahomes and Allen look like they might be the two guys that carry the group, and then you get that. Herbert and Burrow could get in there, and Dak could get in there, and that's your bunch of guys. Lamar Jackson, I think, is still in that mix, and I'm still waiting to see if Trevor can be that guy. The more you hear about Jacksonville and what that situation looks like, the more it's like, man, I got to give that guy a pass.
Yeah,
because he's still a special talent, but you got to give him a pass, I think, because I don't know if you work in a bad working environment over there or anything, but if you've ever been in a bad working environment, it's tough to develop your skills. Not that you're going to call out your boss or anything, but it's tough to develop your skills. So that's how I feel about Trevor Lawrence.
Or Daniel Jones. I mean, even Mara blamed himself. We've done the worst possible job we could do to help this young man, right? I mean, I know he's not
true.
on Trevor Lawrence talent, but he has some skills, right? But when you don't put anything around some of these guys, or you're so dysfunctional and your culture is so rotten, hell, it doesn't matter who you are, right, Steve? You can't be successful.
You're just not getting a clean evaluation of the player, and those are formative years. Your first 3 years in the NFL, right? You're supposed to learn a lot, and you're supposed to, get used to the NFL. I don't know if Daniel Jones comes out of it, but you can also look back and say certainly everything offensively did not put him in position to succeed those first 3 years in the NFL.
Yeah. Steve Palazzolo on the Out of Bounds Show. Steve, we got a minute and a half. We're talking about all these QBs that you just referenced, those top 8. Of course, Dak will be in the top 5 when Sean Payton joins the Cowboys because he'll elevate him, but we'll get into that later. But just real quick, hit on the fact that coaches are not suffocating their quarterback talent anymore, where in the game of football it felt like they did for decades. You see where I'm going?
Yeah, here's the line I always remember. When Michael Vick got drafted, I remember reading the headline, like, Michael Vick's going to run the West Coast offense. It's like, what? You just drafted Michael Vick, and you're going to try to turn him into Joe Montana or Steve Young and have him play within structure? The NFL has gone away from that a little bit this last decade or so, played to the skill set of quarterbacks, stolen from the college game more than they probably had in years past, and that's all a good thing. So, yeah, we're seeing better quarterback development, but also I think coaches adjusting to the fact that, hey, it's a pass-first league, and the NFL's made it a pass-first league. They've made the rules, more favorable for throwing the ball, and I think, coaches have done a much better job of adjusting to that.
We'll leave it there. It's so good, though. The product, I mean, I know the first weekend let us down, but, man, the last 2 were so good. I mean, this game is –
last 6 games were just unbelievable all the way down to the end.
Unbelievable. I mean, that's why the NFL is so dang good. All right. So hold on. I got 30 seconds. What are you doing this weekend? I mean, no football. What's going on?
Probably watch the Senior Bowl and then, gonna relax. I don't know. Hang out with the kids.
Okay.
Wish that spring training was actually going to happen.
I love it.
But it's weird. Sunday afternoon naps are back on the table.
You darn right. All right.
Old man over here.
Have a good weekend. See you, man.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. PFF.com. Senior analyst. He's got the podcast, and they break it all down for you. It's a super cool site. Steve Palazzolo on the Bucked Up Energy Drinks guest line. Don't forget that Mudbugs is slinging crawfish. They're ready for you. Mudbugs. 2 locations in Rankin County. And it's a great time to pair your crawfish with a Modelo or a Corona Premier. Great crawfish, shrimp, and I'm telling you, they've got some great food outside of the crawfish and shrimp on the on the menu at Mudbugs. We'll have, if he gets up, we'll have Dave Bartu on the Out of Bounds show at 9.